Let me give you another illustration of what I'm talking about. I'm holding here my formerly nicotine-stained fingers, a column by a man named Oliver Friedfeld. Oliver Friedfeld is a senior at Georgetown University at the School of Foreign Service. Guy's going to be in the foreign policy bureaucracy of this country someday. He's a senior at the School of Foreign Service, Georgetown. And he writes a piece that runs in a screwl newspaper called The Hoya. It's entitled, "I Was Mugged, and I Understand Why." Last weekend, my housemate and I were mugged at gunpoint while walking home from DuPont Circle. The entire incident lasted under a minute. As I was forced to the floor, handed over my phone, and was patted down. And yet when a reporter asked whether I was surprised that this happened in Georgetown, I said immediately, not at all. It was so clear to me that we live in the most privileged neighborhood within a city that has historically been harshly unequal. While we aren't often confronted by this stark reality west of Rock Creek Park, the economic inequality is very real. Year after year, Washington is ranked among the most unequal cities in the country. The wealthiest 5% earning an estimated 54 times more than the poorest 20%. What's been most startling to me, even more so than the mugging itself, has been the reactions I've gotten. I keep hearing thugs, criminals, bad people. And while I understand why one might jump to that conclusion, I don't think it's fair. Not once did I consider our muggers, our attackers, to be bad people. I trust that they weren't trying to hurt me. In fact, if they knew me, I bet they'd think I was a pretty good guy. Is this not pathetic? There's a little glimpse here into the minds of our indoctrinated youth. You know, it used to be said that a conservative is a liberal who's been mugged. Now, if you want to mug a liberal, you go right ahead, because the correct reaction is love for the mugger, understanding of the economic plight of the mucker. And in addition to that, he goes on to talk about his white privilege and how that could irritate others in this most unequal capital city. Being mugged just makes people aware of their white privilege and the terribleness of income equality. You see how we have progressed? Being mugged is now an act of understanding. It gets you even closer to the misery and the unfairness and the inequality of an unfair, unjust country and system. We wondered, how is it that the State Department after 9/11 could do a seminar on why do they hate us so much? Well, now we know. They're populated by people like this. Yeah, I think the muggers, if they knew me, would probably think I was an okay guy. What does that matter? Okay, folks, that's it. A brief pause here at the top of the busy broadcast hour, and we will come back. This is not a parody. I was not making this up. But this guy was mugged at gunpoint in DuPont Circle. And he's just concerned about the mugger would like him if he got to know him. Anyway, let me move on. I want to finish this, not the whole thing, but you've got to hear some more excerpts from this piece by Oliver Friedfeld. He and his boyfriend were leaving home, or walking around going home, I forget which, in DuPont Circle, nation's capital. It's a very ritzy part of town. They got mugged. And he's written a piece in the Georgetown University screwl newspaper, The Hoya, explaining how he was mugged and he understands why. And he goes on to say that being a person of white privilege, he understands this. The income inequality, he understands muggers now. He's closer to understands it, he's more capable of understanding why they do it. He says, when a reporter asked whether I was surprised this happened in Georgetown, not at all. It was clear to me we live in the most privileged neighborhood within a city that has historically been, continues to be, harshly unequal. What has been most startling to me, even more so than the incident itself, has been the reactions I've gotten. I keep hearing thugs and criminals and bad people, but I don't think that's fair. Not once did I consider our attackers to be bad people. I trust that they weren't trying to hurt me. In fact, if they knew me, I'd bet they'd think I was okay. And Snerdley, during the break, see, this is the problem I have with this. Snerdley said something to me during the point. This guy, what an oddball. He's not an oddball. These people are everywhere now, is my point. These kind of people are in the State Department negotiating. We've got a story in the stack here. The Iranians have concluded the Americans have given up. They have concluded that we have surrendered based on, here it is. It's from the Washington Free Beacon. Iran, Americans have very clearly surrendered. Top Iranian leaders have been celebrating a recently inked extension in nuclear negotiations with the West, with leading military figures and politicians saying that the deal is a sign the Americans have very clearly surrendered to Iran's might. As negotiations in Vienna break up so that leaders from all sides can go home for further deliberations, the Iranians have begun mocking America and insisting that the country's nuclear rights will soon be recognized. Because they just got a 7-month extension in talks. They were supposed to expire 2 days ago. But the Americans have very clearly surrendered to Iran's might. After 9/11, the State Department did a seminar. Why do they hate us so much? What have we done to deserve it? As though it was our fault. These people are not one-offs, Snerdley, and they are not rare. They are being bred and educated in the Ivy League. This guy is a senior at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown. He's going to be in the State Department someday. He's going to be at the Pentagon someday. And this is how he's going to look at bad guys. That it's our fault, that we created them, that it's our responsibility, and we better do everything we can to understand them. And that if they only knew us better, they'd probably like us. You take a look at the American foreign policy today, and you tell me where these guys are not common and prevalent in our foreign policy structure. This is my point. They are not oddballs. Well, they're oddballs. They're not small in number. These kind of people and this kind of thinking is all over the place. Listen to some more of this. The muggers wanted my stuff, not me. While I don't know what exactly they needed the money for, I do know that I have never once had to think about going out on a Saturday night to mug people. I had never before seen a gun, let alone know where to get one. The fact that these two kids, who appeared younger than I, have even had to entertain these questions of mugging people suggests their universes are light years away from mine. In other words, my God, I can't believe how bad life is if the only recourse you have is to mug people. And this was at gunpoint, by the way. This is Stockholm Syndrome times 50,000 in advance. I come from a solidly middle-class family, and I'd venture to guess that our attackers have had to experience things I've never dreamed of. When I struggled in school, I had parents who willingly sat down with me and helped me work through it. When I have a problem, I have countless people I can turn to for solid advice. When I walk around at 2 a.m., nobody looks at me suspiciously, and police don't ask me any questions. I wonder if our attackers could say the same. It may be insane, but I'm telling you, we have a whole generation of people like this. You just don't know it because they don't advertise it like this guy's doing it, but they are everywhere. I'm convinced that they're all over our government. Where do you how about taking this attitude and applying it to illegal immigrants? And then take a look at our policy on it. And you take Obama. Americans have no right to favor Americans. The only Americans that can legitimately object to immigration are native Indian Americans, Obama told a Chicago audience yesterday. He made an impassioned ideological plea for endless immigration, endless cultural diversity, and a big government to manage the resulting multicultural society. Obama said there have been periods where the folks who were already here suddenly say, well, I don't want those folks. Even though the only people who have the right to say that are some Native Americans, Obama said. Rhetorically dismissing the right of 300 million actual Americans to decide who can live in the country. You don't have any right to object, folks, because this country isn't yours in the first place. You took it from the Indians. They are the only ones that can object. Yeah, I know. We thought he believed this. Now we know he thinks this. That's what I'm saying. On these next 2 years, Katie barred the door. And Obama said Americans should not favor other Americans over foreigners. Sometimes we get attached to our particular tribe, Obama said, our particular race, our particular religion, and then we start treating other folks differently. It sometimes has been a bottleneck to how we think about immigration. So in other words, folks, the only people who have a right to complain about 5 million illegals getting amnesty are Native Americans. So just vote Democrat and shut the hell up. In other words, these modern-day illegal immigrants are no different than your ancestors who came over here with the Pilgrims and whoever came later and stole this country from the people who were here first. You're no different than the people storming the southern border now. And you have no right to object to these people coming. The only people, this is Obama. He has said it. He has opened up. He finally admitted what he believes. Okay, you take this and you transfer it to Oliver Friedfield, or whatever his name is here, who has written a piece of solidarity with his mugger, understanding the mugger's plight and explaining that the mugger had total common sense to mug him because he's richer and has more privileges than the mugger does, and you just have to take time to understand. Here's more. Who am I, he writes, to stand from my perch of privilege, surrounded by million-dollar homes and paying for a $60,000 education? Who am I to condemn these young men, the muggers, as thugs? It is precisely this kind of otherization that fuels the problem. What is otherization? Never heard the word till I saw this piece. Well, what he means here is, to call these people thugs, that fuels the problem. That's an insult. You don't know their lives. You don't know their circumstances. Have you ever had to go through life thinking the only way you're ever going to get anything is to rob from somebody? I can't imagine how horrible that is. I was happy to be mugged. I was happy to be mugged because now I understand. I have a better understanding. I was mugged and I understand why. And these people are not thugs. They're human beings just like I am. They just haven't been as fortunate. And my white privilege, I can understand it angering them. He says, I've never had to decide whether or not to steal from people. We're all capable of good and bad, but it's a whole lot easier for me to choose good than it may be for these other people who mugged me to choose good. If we ever want opportunistic crime to end, we should look at ourselves first. So it's our fault for being prosperous, having prosperity, success. That makes us legitimate targets. Now, how many of you have heard people on the left, Democrats, and media, Ivy Leaguers say poverty is the reason there is terrorism? That's all this guy's saying here. And he's going to end up someday in the State Department negotiating with these people. And the Iranians are running around thinking we've given up and surrendered because we're going to continue to extend the current deal. We're not going to insist that they don't get a nuke because as Obama and others, and Dennis Kucinich, and even Ron Paul, the famous libertarian, who are we to tell them we've got one? What right do we have? I'm telling you, these people are everywhere. This guy is not a one-off. He's not unique. This is what is happening in the American educational system at the college level. This is the kind of stuff that's being taught. And it all comes under the umbrella, America is unjust. America is unfair. It's what you see in Ferguson. It's what you see in illegal immigration. It's what you see with every Obama policy there is. And now there's Obama out admitting, we have no right to determine who gets in here. Americans have no right to favor Americans. It's not fair for you to even talk about jobs going to native people who are in this country. Because you're no different than the illegal immigrants crossing the border today. You did it once, too. You took this land from people who previously owned it and had it. So there's no difference. There's a moral equivalence. And in Obama's worldview, and the worldview that's taught this kid at Georgetown, we are the guiltiest nation on earth. And they are all here to make it right now. We'll be back.